So I'm just going to review really quickly how you know what the signs are in each of the quadrants. So if we label this all students take calculus, that means that in the first quadrant, sine of theta is positive, cosine theta is positive, tangent of theta is positive, and also their inverses. Cosecant of theta is positive, secant of theta is positive, and cotangent of theta would have to be positive. In the second quadrant, only the sine of theta is positive, and also its inverse, the cosecant of theta, is positive. In the third quadrant, only the tangent of theta and its inverse, the cotangent of theta, are positive. And finally, in the fourth quadrant, only the cosine of theta is positive, and its inverse, which is the secant of theta, is positive. All right, so now let's do kind of a tricky question. It says, what if we aren't even given the angle? What if we're only given some information about the angle? So this says that we're being told that the sine of theta is -3/5, and that the tangent of theta is a positive number. Find cosine of theta. So using the ideas that we just wrote down about the sines and where they end up occurring, if they're telling me that the tangent is a positive number and that the sine is a negative number, well, the quadrant where that happens, where I get a positive for the tangent but a negative for the sine, would be down in the third quadrant. So only the tangent would be positive there, the sine would be negative. So that means that I am down in quadrant 3. And it's telling me that -3/5 is what popped out. So I need to remember what the values are on a right triangle. If I'm talking about sine of theta, I could just choose whatever side, whatever angle I want to label theta. I'm going to label the top corner theta. And remember, sine is supposed to be the side opposite over the hypotenuse. And they told us that the side opposite then should be -3. And they told us that the hypotenuse should be 5. So I can find the missing side length, which would be the adjacent side, if I use the Pythagorean theorem. So I would say a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I can say I don't know what a squared is, but b squared should be -3 squared. And the c is the hypotenuse always, so this would be 5 squared. So I have a squared equals 25 minus 9. So a would equal 16, a squared would equal 16, which means that your missing side length is 4. So the adjacent side length is 4. Once I know that, that means if I want to find what the cosine of theta is, if we're down in quadrant 3, cosines are negative in quadrant 3. Only the tangents and cotangents are positive. So I know that my answer needs to be a negative number. So I can say that cosine of theta is going to be a negative number. And I also know that cosine, if we go back to what SOHCAHTOA tells us, if I want the cosine, I need the side that's adjacent, which is 4, over the hypotenuse, which is 5. So my final answer here is going to be that the cosine of theta has to be a negative number because of the quadrant that it lands in, and then I created my own triangle to figure out what the side length relationships would need to be, so it's going to be -4/5.